everyone watching and listening, and welcome back to the Free Radical Podcast. This is your host, Swami Padamanabha, and here today with a very special guest, Senior Vaishnavi, and indeed, as you will see, radical personalist, Sudharma dasi. So, Sudharmaji, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Padmanabha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll read a few words of Sudharma's biography so I can introduce her to all of you. Sudharma dasi took initiation from Srila Prabhupada in 1975. She served her Gurudeva's mission by distributing Prabhupada's books around the world in places like Hong Kong, the Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, and the Pacific Northwest of the United States. After some period of time, Sudharma settled into married life and provided for her family in Washington, D.C., working with the vegetarian and animal rights movement. In the late 80s, she served in a management capacity for the next 15 years. One of her main roles was executive officer for the ISKCON GBC and temple president in North America. Also, Sudharma was the first woman invited into the GBC meetings in Mayapur, during which time she founded and headed up what was then known as the International Women's Ministry, now known as the Vaishnavi Ministry. At that time, women were not allowed to give class, lead kirtan, or be temple presidents, and Sudharma was able to use her influence in these leadership roles to turn that around through GBC resolution and active networking. In the early 2000s, Sudharma taught school and then opened an after-school program attended by about 60 children, which ran for over a decade in Alachua. She also ran the Hare Krishna community radio for 4 years. A few years back, Sudharma was again called to a series of leadership meetings in North America, where they first brought forward and utilized the term radical personalism. So,
something we share, yes, very much.
yeah, we'll see
Although
that.
you wrote the book, right?
So I would like to share for those who would like eventually to to contact Sudharma, her email, which is susanwheeland@gmail.com. So if I'm not mistaken, you correct me, Sudharma, we met last year personally. Pranada made the arrangement. She introduced me to you and vice versa, especially in the context of radical personalism. I came to know at that time that you actually were already employing this term radical personalism long time before I even thought before I thought I coined it, so to say. So that was for me very sorry.
Oh, I didn't say anything, but but I will say then that Krishna's in the heart, right? So
Yeah. So for me that was the special of it because it's not that I thought I coined the term, but just it came in a certain way. And
yeah.
it came in a certain way to you, and later I heard that other devotees using it without knowing each other. So for me, that's the mystical thing of that. No,
Yeah,
so
it was
today I
actually
was
Rukmini and I that came up with it, together. Yeah,
okay, I remember talking with her, and she also mentioned that after reading my book. So
yeah.
anyhow, it was a very interesting. I really love when two different people or more than two reach similar places or similar conclusions or similar insights without knowing each other, and eventually they met each other. So we were thinking with Sudharma today that we should honor this coincidence, or I would like to call it God incidence, and talk about probably our common favorite topic on radical personalism.
And it's a wonderful topic, right? I mean, it's very enriching and helps us to come alive as individuals. So I'm looking forward to this talk so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, Sudharma, you tell me to begin with, before we dive into the notion of radical personalism and some of its implications, as I like to ask some of my guests, what contribution to the world we think we can make today with our conversation? In other words, why you have accepted being here today? No? And this is not the loss of your time and energy, hopefully.
Well, there's a couple of points I think I would share. I mean, the first is that as devotees, oftentimes we kind of think, like we're very prone towards austerity and renunciation. And, sometimes we forget the importance of just being warm-hearted with each other and how much of a difference that makes in people's lives. And on one level, we think of it as being sentiment rather than understanding that this is actually an inherent part of who we are as devotees. It's an inherent part of our philosophy. The six Goswamis were always loved by everyone because they were kind to everyone. And if you look within the hearts of our efforts as devotees and sharing as society and community, and even as a movement, it's really easy to see that a lot of devotees, they understand the philosophy, but they have a harder time when the association becomes more rough and tumble, you know. It's really
Mm,
important that people feel like, you know, their identity, Krishna is everyone's best friend, that we can feel that in our community and that we act in a way that brings out and supports others as individuals, not just getting something done or proving a philosophical point, but rather really uplifting each other as people and helping us on that path back home, back to Godhead. And when that's intact, it's so much more attractive and so much more engaging and so much more enlivening for everybody to be active in their devotional lives. It wakes up who we are as people. So that this is not sentiment, it's part of our philosophy. Srila Prabhupada even came to eradicate impersonalism in the West.
mhm.
So as devotees, we have a duty to honoring principles of personalism and all the value and dignity and integrity, everything that comes with it. Does that help as a start?
Yeah, of course. Now, I will say that the rest of our conversation will be unpacking all that you have just said in these few minutes, which is very, very thick, very rich in content. And I, of course, totally agree with you. Again, without knowing that you have reached to the term of radical personalist, without knowing you as a person, on my own journey and on my own search, I kind of arrived at very similar places that the ones you are describing here. No, the need of,
Yeah,
as you yourself told me, in one of our exchanges, for example, you gave the example of your Gurudev's pranam mantra, Srila Prabhupada's pranam mantra, which
right.
includes the term nirvishesha shunyavadi, and how he came to eradicate or to deliver uh, the West, in particular, the mantra mentions Paschatya Desatarine, as Westerners from impersonalism. So I will, yeah, it's nice to conceive of, okay, my service to Prabhupada, my service to the Parampara, my guru, and so on is in part, at least, to to be delivered from impersonalism, not only to extend that to others, but first to allow that to be extended to myself, and not be fully sure that I am completely free from impersonalism, because sometimes we run the risk of taking these things for granted. Like we may say, okay, I'm devoted now, so that means I believe in Krishna, which means I'm a theist. But many times a day we may behave like if God does not exist. So
Yes.
that's called functional atheism. Or we could say we are against Mayabad and we are all for personalism. But as you mentioned, in the arena of personal relationships, we may prove quite obsolete sometimes, quite lacking, and that's a great arena for us to enter, to grow into in service, uh, in service, not like a secondary things, but all this is in service to what our lineage uh, represents. And I appreciated the point that you emphasized that uh, personalism is not a sentimental thing. Mm. I don't know if you would like to unpack that a little bit, because sometimes, as you may know better than me, this word sentimental is very you quickly and easily invoked to cancel anything. No, like sometimes
Exactly.
the word
Right.
apparat may be weaponized. Also, we have these different terms that we know when to press that button if we want to create some cognitive dissonance or some canceling. So sentimental accusations of sentimentality may be one of those. I don't know if you have any thoughts in your more than half a century of experience in this connection.
Well, that's why we like that word radical, right? Because it goes right to the root. And you know, who's at the
Yeah.
root? Who's situated in every single atom of this universe? Who's situated in the heart of every living being? You know, it's Krishna.
Mhm.
So when something's connected to Krishna, it's not connected to material matter. And I think that's the kind of sentiment that people disparage, that they don't really care for. but they sometimes fail to make the conclusion that just being good to another person and encouraging to another person is not material
mm,
sentiment. You know, it's
mm,
not that every relationship is automatically material. Rather,
mhm,
as devotees, I mean, and that's also again going back to principles in that Srila Prabhupada wrote down since I'm his disciple. So please be forbearing with me there. Um, the third prince in the corporation documents that Prabhupada wrote when he wrote his purposes, one of his purposes was to bring everybody closer to each other with Krishna in the
mm,
center.
mm,
So, and of course, the principle of servant of the servant is such a strong central theme. It's almost impossible to develop your devotional sentiment without having that mood towards other living beings, not just Vaishnavas, but other living beings.
mm,
So,
mm,
yeah. So, I'm sorry, I lost my track a little bit, but so the idea then that personalism is at the center uh, and is not a sentimental principle is just one that we just have to accept. I mean, the Lord is situated in my heart and your heart, not as a stone or as an impersonal being. He's personally situated within the heart
mm,
of every living being. And when we're interacting and doing these things, I mean, why is it that offense is such a big deal? Because when we offend the living being, especially the pure devotee, we're offending the Lord. Krishna's there. He's situated. He's personally situated with us. We may have
mm,
left him, but he never leaves us. So when we're
mm,
interacting with other people, if we're treating them as if they're not connected to Krishna, what does that really amount to? Or if we're
mm,
thinking that we're better or better situated or that they're only in Maya, or any of these things, it's hurtful to the living being. It's because it's also hurtful to Krishna.
mm.
If we want to go back,
Amen.
come back to Godhead, how are we going to get there? How are we
Hmm.
going to get there? We
Yeah,
left
yeah.
because of envy and in our relationships, and we're messing up the
Mhm.
Leela. So here we are. We wanted to control. Yeah. So yeah,
Thank
is
you.
that
Thank you
fair
for
to say?
sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair to say. Yeah, totally. And I recall how Prabhupada, as you mentioned, these original papers that he founded also in that context, that's mentioned by some devotee, that he said, okay, oh, we have all these rules, all these papers, all this legal stuff that we need to have for the institution to be officially like inaugurated. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to love and trust.
Yes.
He said once that, and he said if all if all the things that we are making now, like in that case ISKCON as an institution, if all the rules and things we are creating get in the way of the love and trust, the same amount of effort we are investing to create all this thing, the same effort we should use to dismantle this whole thing if it gets in the way of love and trust. Like making the strong point in connection to what you made, because love and trust is not only me with Krishna, I love you, I trust you, and I express the opposite with everyone else. Because if we do that, as you properly mentioned, we are like isolating Krishna from everyone else. We are saying Krishna is up there or who knows in which direction, and everyone else is an absolute disconnected unity, which is not the case. No? And we are showing how little we see Krishna in every person. And there are so many sections in the scripture where Krishna himself is saying, if you worship me, famous section in the third canto with Kapila, if you worship me as a deity, but mistreat other people, not even he's saying my devotees, but other people in general, your worship is basically in vain, he's saying.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like throwing ashes into the fire. He will give that example. So that's how, yeah, how related this is of how we treat each other, how warm and affectionate and compassionate and empathic we are with everyone, with every living entity. How that's part of our lifestyle, of our sadhana. No, I always recall back to Thakur saying, Jivadai Krishnanam Sarva Dharma Sar. The essence of all Dharma, and here today I'm talking with Sudharma dasi.
Yeah.
Yes, the essence of all Dharma. And he begins saying Jivadai, interestingly. He begins saying, be compassionate to all living beings, be generous to everyone. And then he said Krishna Nam, the name of Krishna. I'm not want to put the name of Krishna in a secondary position. But interestingly, he begins saying Jibadai. So he makes that point, like treat each other generously and chant the name of Krishna. In that, following that lifestyle, Sarva Dharma Sar. That's the essence of Dharma. Mm. So for me, that there's no escape from that line, so to say.
Oh, that's such a nice. So, thank you for putting that so sweetly and nicely and pleasurable to hear. Job well done. It's beautiful. Thank you.
You're
Yeah, there's so many things we can talk about here. I mean, we can talk about the importance of dependence of the living being on Krishna and the difference that that makes. We can talk about how what a wonderful platform for outreach and sharing Krishna consciousness personalism is, and how people are struggling, feeling fragmented and feeling alone. And if we can give them something that's so enriching and in that way connect them to Krishna, I mean, there's so many ways that we can take this discussion. How would you like to move forward?
where to go. Yeah, you're tempting me in so many directions.
I hope that you take one that you really enjoy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I want to take all of them, so I'm just overwhelmed for a second trying to pick my choice to begin with. But yeah, I agree. I like to. We can share a few words in this connection. How personalism, not only to talk about it, but to of course embody it, can be so moving and so touching in us sharing Christian consciousness with others, no? And how the opposite of that, which sometimes it helps to further illustrate the point, the opposite of personalism can be really damaging uh, in the way of us representing quote unquote bhakti. No? Because if we represent bhakti to others impersonally, you can imagine which example that person, which message that person will receive from us. Total short circuiting. But if our words and our embodied words and our example is really personal to the core, uh, that will create an epiphany for people, which for me that's the most powerful and impactful thing. Not only giving the book or not only sharing a word, but giving them an experience of personal connection, which again, as you mentioned, it's so lacking in the world and people is so thirsty for.
Yeah. Yeah. Just a few anecdotal little things.
Yeah, please.
One time many years ago in the 80s, the movement, this kind of movement was struggling very intensely, and people were really suffering from that, and a lot of people were just kind of moved into themselves. And, it wasn't a very happy time. And I
Hmm.
was living in the Potomac Temple, and it was very empty. Even the deities weren't being regularly attended to. So much different now, by the way. They just had their temple opening there, which was beautiful.
Mm, I heard, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, at that time, it was very depressed. And just as out of curiosity, I went to the Buddhist temple down the street. And when I walked in there, they were all so warm and friendly and nice. I mean, this is, we're going back like almost 40 years now. And it was just such a striking comparison for me, because we had come out of a time where we were really taking things out on each other. And here, these people, they were the impersonalists, and they had this like, thriving, warm hearted, like very personal, that made you feel completely comfortable community. And I thought, you have to learn in all of these situations, you have to see the potency and the value. And, you know, when I, when you exist in the world on the outside, people seem like they're just like buzzing, doing all these things, a lot of things that I'm not interested in doing, and definitely in the mode of passion. But on the outside, you think that there's like, something kind of normal going on. But as soon as you dig down a little bit deeper, people are struggling in so many ways, whether it's illness or, not having loving friends and family, or just not knowing what their purpose is in life. All of these, different things that people in earnest do question, if not outright struggle, and really, even just being able to put food on their plates sometimes for their families. And, if they can be attracted, if they can come in contact with devotees and, feel that sense of spirituality and that connection and actual love and care, what a powerful preaching platform that is. Like, you almost don't have to say anything. It just is
Mhm.
something that people want to be a part of naturally. Is that,
Yeah,
what do you think?
yeah. I like when you say you don't need to say almost anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always remember Mahaprabhu converting Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya in silence for a whole week in silence. That was his preaching method, so to
Yeah,
say.
so true.
But he was so personal. His presence was so much there. He was listening to him with so much attention and presence to the other person that his silence, but his full presence and his full personalism in silence was enough. So yeah, it makes me
Yeah.
think of that. No, even if we will have that powerful presence and be there for the other person personally again, which requires presence and caring and really wanting to be there for the other, that will say more than thousands of words. And as you mentioned, that can be such a powerful experience, a moving experience. Because
It's
at the end of the day, I will sorry, no, I was saying that at the end of the day, we have the philosophy, we have so many beautiful ingredients to the bhakti life, so to say. But if there is no personal connection with significant individuals that touch our heart, it will be difficult to sustain ourselves in the process in a healthy way for the right reasons.
yeah.
No, that's what makes the whole journey is not only sustainable but enjoyable and with some concrete hope, with realistic hope that this is real, this is going somewhere, and I want to go there. No? Not just being there because I have no option, because of social pressure, because of ulterior motives, but to really voluntarily, fully choose to remain there at the end of the day is only because of personal connection with significant individuals. No.
Yeah, well, I think when that feeling, that understanding, this both the self-satisfaction and the connection with the Lord internally within our heart is so deep and so transitional and so satisfying that you don't even, it's not even really a thought, almost like what you just described. It's already, you're already transcending that. Like, you're just so, it's something that emanates from inside. And you feel so
Mm.
grateful and you feel, connected and peaceful. There's a gentleness. There's all the wonderful things of, qualities of self-satisfaction that it just becomes you. It's not it's not something that you even have to like weigh. Like, as devotees, we're very discriminatory on a certain level, discriminating between Maya and Krishna. But when it comes to awakening the heart inside and awakening others' hearts too, because that's the most loving exchange there is in this world, really. I mean, Prabhupada
Mm.
talked about mother and child, and certainly that's a big, that it maybe, that I don't know, I can't say, but for me personally in my life, when you're awakening someone's heart in devotional service, it's just like, I mean, everything, just, it's just everything in your life. I mean, yeah. So, the point being, yeah, just everything that you
Mm.
described and more. It's completely self-satisfying. It's not something that you have to like split apart or contemplate. It's just something that is, and it brings you out for who you are as well. And I don't mean to
Mm.
make that sound sentimental or too much in the moment. It's just real. Krishna's real. He's situated in your heart.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And in that connection, what comes to mind, which is another topic that is part of radical personalism, and you also express an interest in talking about that, is vulnerability,
Ah,
in
yes.
connection to what we are in connection to what we are talking about now. Also, no, not only in us in relation to Krishna and our surrender and dependence on Him, but also in terms of how we relate with one another uh, in vulnerable terms. No, like with healthy vulnerability, with healthy boundaries, with healthy perimeter and protection and a healthy built trust. But we need to be vulnerable in one relationship or another. We need a point in our life, a place, another person, or ourselves with Krishna, of course. uh, we need to enter that space, that sacred space of vulnerability. And at least for me, as you know, this is so crucial. Actually, when I made like the unpacking on radical personalism in the third part, I made 7 chapters with the main, so
Yes,
to
I
say,
noticed
highlights.
that. Yeah.
And I began with vulnerability. No, I couldn't help but we have to begin there, because if we are not vulnerable, we are not open. We remain a closed system instead of an open one, and there won't be change, transformation, and connection. I won't be able to enter into your heart, and vice versa. So, so yeah, some thoughts on vulnerability, and I'd like to
Yes.
hear yours, of course.
Well, um, the first principle of material life is, of spiritual life is being able to discriminate between matter and spirit. And in order to be able to do that, we have to, understand that we're not the controllers.
Hmm.
This is a very big principle in our lives because a lot of people feel security around the concept of controlling. But there's actually no security there because ultimately we can't control. Um, even organizationally, we can be organized, but we never know what's going to come moment to moment in our lives or what's going to happen. So the only real security is really taking shelter, and that requires vulnerability. Vulnerability is it couples with dependence on Krishna.
Yeah.
So the gopis, they're exalted amongst all the devotees because they're always totally dependent upon Lord Krishna. So our mood, in our services, our mood in our relationships, our mood in our service to the deities, to our sadhana, when you're crying out for Krishna, when you're able to just let go and let Krishna take your life and be guided, um, well, that is walking the path of devotional life. It's not something that you can forego or work around. And of course, when you put yourself in that position, then you are much more properly constitutionally situated with the Supreme Lord,
Mm.
first starting in your heart. So that vulnerability that pours out in so many different ways and makes very vast differences in the way that we interact on every and constitutionally in every element and aspect of our lives. So when
Mm.
devotees perform wonderful services, things that they could never conceive of, that and they always say it was Krishna, it's because it was. Because when you have that attitude of vulnerability, Krishna can act with you and through you, and in a way that's most beneficial for others. That's the transparent medium. And that can only come about with that vulnerability and that love, as you say, and the trust. All of those things have to be in place. And, sometimes devotees, I feel, they become a little confused with the bodily concept. And, a lot of these things with some of the atrocities, if I may use that word, that women have faced and children have faced in our movement, it's because of this mixing up and not understanding, the soul separated from the material body, and the importance of protecting the soul, the individual soul. Um, when we don't have that feeling of dependence, we're not able to be successful in seeing living beings as not their bodies. And then we say, well, we're not realized, and you should act like this. You should act like you're, you know, part of the material world or something. Like women aren't devotees; they're something else. Wives in the kitchen or whatever it is. Um,
Mhm.
which, I love to cook and all that kind of stuff. I love my kids, but that's not the point. The point is that I love being a devotee. And I think
Mhm.
that many of the wonderful services that have been performed by men and women, both, like, we just brought up the example of the DC temple, which that whole project was headed up by an entrepreneur and a woman. It's not like you think, oh, a woman's supposed to head up a construction project, but there she is. And there's this wonderful result. Of course, she was working with all the members in her community, but she understood how to do that as a devotee. and Krishna
Hmm.
empowered her. And Krishna can empower any living being that has that interest or that desire. And when Krishna is empowering someone, no matter who they are, what their bodily concept is, what, where they've come from, where they stand on a social rung or whatever it happens to be, um, their birth, their, all the different things that we use sometimes as dividers in our society. When Krishna is empowering that living entity, that's Krishna. And if we're blocking that service, we're blocking that empowerment, we're actually, you know, proving our enmity towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Hmm.
So all of this starts from that kind of very, almost covetable special place in our hearts where we have that vulnerability and that dependence on Krishna and allow him to work through us and see that in others around us as well. And that's where it lifts beyond the material sentiment, that we're actually
Hmm.
serving, that we're appreciating, that we're valuing, we're giving dignity, we're giving, we're helping the individual to feel their wholeness, their integrity. We're respecting, we're valuing the service and the individuality of every person, their devotion. So yeah, it begins with vulnerability, wouldn't you say?
Hmm. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And I appreciate the point you made on how the fact that we show genuine vulnerability warranties that what we are doing is not sentimental, so to say, because in sentimentality there is not genuine vulnerability. No? So
Yeah, it doesn't
if
last, it doesn't hold up, right?
yeah,
It's
so
just a
genuine
sentiment. Yeah,
yeah, so genuine vulnerability is a very powerful protection, if you will, against sentimental expression and warranties that we are really making a sustainable presentation of the heart from a genuine place with authenticity, with dignity, and yeah, I really like what you mentioned. Also, like basically speaking about vulnerability as a synonymous with being a devotee, with practicing devotional service. You cannot do that without the other. No? You cannot be an not vulnerable devotee, so to say. So you
yeah,
need to embrace this attribute, which, as I try to mention in my book, actually that's who we are. No? In one sense, we are by nature vulnerable. So
yeah. We're in a
so
very
being
vulnerable
yeah,
position.
so being vulnerable doesn't mean so much to okay, I choose to be vulnerable now. No, you are vulnerable, and we choose to acknowledge that or not.
Yeah,
So and in that sense, we could say vulnerability is a synonym for sincerity, also, like to acknowledge who I am, basically, to
our
not go in
position.
denial.
Yeah,
Exactly, to not live my life as if I am something that I'm not, basically. So, in that sense, being vulnerability is synonymous with sincerity, with sobriety, with seeing reality for what it is,
and
and
humility.
I love humility. Totally,
Actual
totally.
real humility, not false
Yeah,
humility.
yeah, because so many times we can also use these words humility so many times, but again, we may need to add actual humility, actual before the word humility, and then explain what's actual humility and bring forth
Would you
vulnerability
like
into
to
the
do that? That would
conversation.
be great. Would you like to talk a little bit about that, actual humility?
Yeah, of course, you have already done so for sure. I'm just continuing with the conversation, but
Yeah.
yeah, of course, we have Mahaprabhu's third verse, Sikshastakam. This is kind of our motto, like, okay, no, Trinada Pisu Nichena, and so on. And that's the attitude with which we should conduct ourselves in chanting, which is the essence of our practice. So humility is kind of the all in all. And with every, I would say, with every quality, with every attribute that is like the most emphasized, the most mentioned in one tradition or another, it tends to somehow become confused at one point or become misread or misinterpreted. And of course, I wouldn't say that humility is only one thing. No, we can define humility in so many ways, and there are so many degrees of humility that will be correspondingly expressed according to the stage we are. We could even say that the Sikshastakam, in one sense, shows each verse a progression of humility. There's a place for thinking like that also.
Mm,
But of course, the idea is that humility must be there whether you are in day one in your Krishna consciousness or you are just about to enter Golok Vrindavan. There's always an expression of humility accompanying your journey. And I will say that for that to happen, there must be an expression of vulnerability, a
yeah.
corresponding vulnerability to the corresponding humility in
Yeah.
every stage. It's
Yeah.
not that,
Exactly.
okay, I have to be vulnerable in my first years, but when I become a sannyasi or temple president or very advanced devotee, no need to be vulnerable now. The contrary, the more you advance, the more vulnerable you will become in one
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Well, of
Mm,
course, I mean, Bhaktivinoda Thakur in specific, in our line of acharyas,
mm, mm,
so many of his prayers are really discussing embracing humility.
mhm.
I'm so fallen, and it isn't something that he is saying to set an example or
Exactly.
anything along. It's something that it's a relief. It's a feeling of attachment. It's a feeling of connection. It's something you want to embrace and feel good about. It's not about
Mm,
degradation of the self on any level, material or spiritual. It's not about, I'm going to be humble to others because there's, like they're in a position that I need to be humble to. It's something much
mm,
more than that. It's about actually feeling so good and understanding our position as being fallen and and finding our connection to Krishna and embracing that. And the relief that it gives, that all of a sudden you're not in this position where you have to prove yourself, you just have to depend on Krishna. It's
mm.
something. I'm having
Yeah.
trouble finding the words, but it's so tangible and so real. So letting go, being vulnerable, being dependent, taking that position, it's something fulfilling. It isn't something demeaning. Yeah.
Hmm. Thank you. Thank you for that. Because many times I appreciate that clarification. Many times humility is really misunderstood and misread as something that will take me to a place that I won't like, no, or it is
Or that
something
that
that it is not
degrade you as a
it's
living
not
being.
relishable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not relishable to be humble. Something like that. It's kind of a tapasya that I have to do. It's something I need, a quality I need to embrace although I don't like, so I arrive to a place that I like. Sometimes we may conceive that in that wrong way. Okay,
Well,
I
yeah.
have
I
to be
mean, as far as
humble.
the goal, right? I mean, the goal is that ultimate relationship with Krishna.
Yeah, but still there will be full humility there. It's not that I have to be humble as a means to a goal which does not include humility. On the contrary, no, Sanatan Goswami says in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, the more love you have, the more humility you have. The more humility you have, the more love you have. And the
It
two
just
of
comes
them,
automatic. They just go. Yeah.
yeah, the two of them act like cause and effect of each other. So we will never get rid of humility, so to say. That will be with us for eternity. So better we learn to coexist with it
Yeah.
in a
And I,
happy,
I don't
healthy way.
I don't want to say that there isn't a place for humility, socially. I mean, it's not that that's necessarily undesirable, but when it's the
Mm,
kind of humility that causes harm to the individual, that
mm,
is a false humility that absolutely has to be reexamined and tossed out. That is not, like you're saying, it's leading to a result that you don't want to go to. That's not healthy. That doesn't mean that sometimes that we don't appreciate and value others even in different circumstances. It just means that we remain discriminating. We don't do that
mhm,
blindly. We're not humble just because we're supposed to be humble. We're humble because there's a reason for it. There's not only just the experience of it, but it may be that like if you're working in a group, maybe sometimes it's time to say something, maybe sometimes it's not, but you keep your discrimination. You never give up your discrimination with humility or
mhm,
vulnerability or any of these different elements, no matter how they're wonderful on their own, but we're not going to do it in an unhealthy way, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. And since you touch upon that, and upon humility and toxic versions of humility, so to say, or vulnerability. And you mentioned before for a minute about the situation of Vaishnavis in our communities, in the present, in the past. So why not go in there for a minute? Now, since you have been quite involved into like establishing the dignity of woman in the Vaishnava tradition, and struggling probably with some currents of false humility in the sense of women are expected to be this and that. They should be humble with an idea of humility in that connection, like a demeaning idea. They should be submissive to this and that while the other person is not behaving properly. So invoking these false notions of humility, submission, vulnerability, and creating really chaos and trauma and so much unnecessary suffering. So you have been really engaged in that and still are. Uh, but I like you to share a few words regarding your experience, and especially since we are talking throughout radical personalism and the antithesis of that as impersonalism. So how women Vaishnavis have been affected by impersonalism and what that looks like. Do you
My
have any
goodness.
thoughts about that?
I mean, so there's, I mean, just unlimited instances of things that we could discuss, on this topic of women being
Mm,
treated impersonally.
mm,
Maybe first a little bit of a definition, just that when women are being treated just as women and not as individuals, well, that's extremely problematic. That's very problematic across the board, not just with women.
yeah.
I
Or
mean,
even sometimes, sorry, even sometimes not even as a woman.
right.
Sometimes as an object, sometimes as a less than an animal. I mean,
Yeah.
even that, not to interrupt, but just to make the point that unfortunately that has happened as well. Yeah. So,
Okay, so I mean, this is it, just to take that just a little bit further, and I want to directly talk about women. This is important to me, but first, I would like to say that this whole discussion of Anashram, when
mhm,
it's more about classification of individuals than it is about the individual being, to me,
mm,
that's the distinction between, uh, the Varnashram system that's based on bodily concept and Daivi Varnashram.
yeah.
That's right at the root of where there's, the discernment and the distinguishment needs to be, that, any ordering of society isn't meant, to please somebody's idea of how they feel the society is supposed to operate. Rather, it's meant to uplift every living being, and give them a connection to the Supreme Lord in their devotional life. So anything that's demeaning, and of course, Van Ashram anyway, the caste system is turned on its ear. Prabhupada said that, demons are taking birth as brahmanas. So, to go back and try and put everybody on the bodily concept and go back to the Manu Samhita, and especially
Mm,
only do that for the women, like the women are
mm,
supposed to act according to Manu Samhita, but not the sannyasis or the grihastas or anyone else,
mm,
because, we've already proven that you don't do that with Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, and, and
mhm,
different circumstances. But for the women, they're all supposed to act like they were, straight out of the Manu Samhita
mhm.
and just be women. So this is dangerous. I
Okay,
feel
it
it's
seems it got interrupted,
oh, okay.
Sudharma. So I'll
Yes.
wait for a minute
Okay.
to see if you come back.
Okay.
Are you there? Yeah.
I'm here. Can you see me? You hear
Yeah,
me?
yeah. It got interrupted just for a few seconds, so no problem.
Okay. Anyway, I was just saying that
Yeah, you
this
were
is where,
talking about. Yeah. Go on,
yeah,
go on. Sorry.
no, no, that's okay. That's where the distinguishing needs to be in, in our thoughts about how we work together.
Hmm.
We have to see every individual as an individual. Everyone has their own specific gifts that they've been given by the Supreme Lord. And those all have to be not only acknowledged, but they have to be utilized in the service of the Lord, both for the
Hmm.
individual and for the communities involved. So
Hmm.
back to women. Honestly, it almost really just gives me a headache because,
Yeah. Sorry for that.
no,
It's a
that's okay.
necessary. It's a necessary headache, as you know. It's a necessary topic which implies a necessary headache.
And
But
I do want to speak about it. Yeah.
I know you had the lots of those type of headaches throughout your lifetime. So sorry to add
Yeah.
another layer of that.
Yeah. When you go a little bit below the surface, this is a much more serious and severe problem than
Mm,
it's very difficult to imagine. And just on the outside of it, just very quickly, just to kind of justify that statement, um, when I was doing the ministry in Mayapur and I was attending the Mayapur meetings, so
mm,
many ladies felt like I could do something to help them individually in their circumstances. And I remember that one morning I was just walking from where the householders live in Mayapur to the temple, which is, a little bit of a walk.
yeah.
And I left like an hour before greeting of the deities, but I never made it into the temple room because all along the way I was being stopped by so many women. And they weren't talking about, I just wish it was nicer to do my service, although that's always there, of course. But they were talking about rape and suicide and murder and just
Mm,
so many things, all just based around the bodily concept of life and the need and the desire to control rather than to value and give dignity and love and trust and integrity. This is not a small issue, even when it's not always apparent. It's just because it's not apparent on the surface, and just because some people have been able to have good lives doesn't mean that this distinguishment of women, as their bodies, solely and wholly, hasn't caused great distress both in our movement and outside of our Krishna conscious lives. When
mm,
I say movement, I mean it, our bhakti movement. I'm not talking just
yeah.
about ISKCON.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the shaky part of it. But I mean, like, even in the most light ways, just the tendency to minimize, when a woman has something to say that, that it's offhanded and it's not that important, where it might really make a big difference. To be that person who's always being minimized is a very discouraging place to be in life. And is it necessary?
Mm,
Can we value what someone has to say?
mm,
Can we look in another person's shoes and look at life in that way? Can we see that this person has a lot more to offer? I mean, can we just do that as people, as human beings, just to start?
mhm, mm. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's as
That's a
you
very broad
concluded.
picture. That's not the
Yeah.
philosophical.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but it's crucial, and it's again it's basically human. No, to begin with, we have to reclaim our humanity as spiritual practitioners, because it doesn't make any sense to be quote unquote topmost transcendentalist and lack the basic humanness to relate to another person as a person, again, to treat the other person for what the person is, not for as a body, not as an object, not as a disturbance, like a potential obstacle in my path, a woman, all this type of stuff, but trying to
Yeah,
connect
and
with the
it's very
person there.
harmful when you're the recipient of that.
Yeah, yeah, and I cannot. I say yeah, but I'm not in those shoes, so I know I'm surely failing to fully empathize with that. Of course, I know it is like that. I try to connect with that as much as I feel I can, as a soul born in a male body who somehow
Right.
or other has to justify all the
Yeah,
mistreatment to
and
women
there's
made
no
by men.
justice. It's not even that. It's just asking you to please not be that way yourself. You know,
Hmm. Yeah,
and I'm
thank
not
you.
directing that to you. I'm directing that to any individual.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, but
and
but
any
I I I
individual.
I take it for me as well, because yeah, we have the potential to do beautiful things, but we have also the potential to do
To cause a great
horrible
deal
things.
of harm. Yes. Well,
Hmm.
okay. So
So
now a couple more points, if that's okay.
yeah, of course.
I want to reiterate the point that I made earlier that women have been empowered to do incredible things. Okay, so
Yeah.
you can't discount anyone based on the body that they're in. I mean, you had Lord Chaitanya's associates born as Muslims. You have women who are in this day and age that are born as women, although they may have, very, many capacities that go beyond just a traditional female role. And not only that, you have women in this world who have to go beyond the female role. Like everybody has to support themselves in the world today. It
mm,
just staying home only works if there's a partner there who can support the entire household. But in the West, not only is the West based on a two-person economy, but you have many women who are alone and they must take care of
mhm,
themselves,
mhm,
and they
mhm,
must go outside of traditional roles. And not only that, but they've been successful. you know it's not that there aren't women who aren't great scientists, and or heading up temple projects, or running communities, which women have been doing forever in history. That's not really that uncommon. So that's one element: the diversity, the beauty, the integrity of the individual. All of these things must be manifest along with any other concepts that you would personally like to embrace in your life. You can't embrace, say, traditionalism without including the deepest values, which are the values that we want to cultivate, which start with value and respect, and valuing the individual for who they are.
mm,
If you skip all those things, then you are on the perverted side of societal development. Is
mm.
that fair to say?
Yeah,
Okay.
and we fall, yeah, we fall back totally to impersonalism again.
That's exactly
As
right.
as
Yes.
basically as that sounds, if I don't treat a woman, anyone but a woman, even as a person, I mean, I'm just an impersonalist. Just let's
Yes.
put it bluntly.
Yes. That's right.
I'm not
That's exactly
not
right.
I'm not treating you as not only all that you are, but all that you can be in potential, as you mentioned. No, Vaishnavis women in general, of course, have tremendous potential, and as you mentioned, so many incredible examples in our tradition. Outside of it, in my podcast, I've liked. I mean, recently I invited Kalakanti Dasi. She's a scholar. She's a very interesting
Right.
Vaishnavi. I recall last year also having, well, many Vaishnavis. I won't recall each of them, but one that comes to mind is Ilia Delio. She's a Franciscan nun and a
Isn't that
theologian
incredible?
and,
Yeah,
and a
nice.
scientist, and has like 2 or 3 PhDs and things like
Yeah, yeah,
that. And it's like,
exactly.
wow.
Right? I know, I know. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, I
Oh,
can't remember her name, but the person who identified that hydrogen was integral in the universe, that was a woman. Just as for
mm,
example, like,
mm,
like
mm,
they don't even recognize her or give her credit, because she was a woman.
mhm,
Even I think I was just reading. I can't remember what one of the schools she attended. She completed all the coursework, and they still wouldn't give her a PhD. So she went and
hmm.
came over here to. It was in England, and she came here to America to some of the, I don't know, Yale or somewhere. I can't, Harvard. I can't remember where. Anyway, the point is, women have had a hard go of it. Just based on the fact that they're not men. So
Yeah,
that doesn't
yeah,
mean that because we have very traditional elements within our philosophy and our lifestyle. That doesn't mean that we disrespect or we minimize or we devalue or any of those things. That's the opposite of what we're intended to do.
yeah.
But
And
a
I think
different,
and I think also, sorry, Sudharma. Now, one
no,
point that I think that we in general as humanity, and especially male uh, species, so to say, need to, and as Gaudiya Vaishnavas even more specifically, we really need to get more in touch, get more in touch with the female side of things, with the female
now that's
principle.
another whole aspect. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's at the root of this problem also, because if I'm a male born person and I mistreat woman, that speaks about how I am relating with the feminine principle as a whole. It's not
Yes.
something personal with that lady I'm mistreating. Probably it's more about how I'm processed. I have my own female side, because
Yeah.
I mean both men and women have female and feminine side. They are a byproduct of a male and a woman. So these two
Well, and
chromosomes
also
are
Radha
coming
and
to the
Krishna,
same.
right? I mean, our our
Of course,
our
yeah,
personification of Godhead is male and female. But we do know this. I mean, with any sensitivity, we do understand that the bodies that we're in are temporary. I'm a woman in this life. I may be a man in the next life, and you may be the woman in the next next life. And like if I haven't learned my lessons in this life as a woman, I may go and hurt other women in my next life and then have to do it all over again. But the point is that we're not these bodies, and as as living beings, we are naturally, there is female and male, and even in many respects, even more female because of our mood of devotion. So there always has to be that balance between the male and the female because we are composed, like you say, of both. And it's not because
Mhm.
I'm a woman in this body that therefore I possess necessarily, all these womanly qualities. I have male and female in me.
Yeah,
Um, you know,
yeah,
and hopefully so do you, like that you
yes,
can recognize and, benefit from that and many levels. I mean, absolutely. As souls, you know, as souls, that's who we are. We are composed of male and female identity, maybe in different quantities, but absolutely yes, right? Yeah,
yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
agreeing with you, and I'm going in circles,
yeah.
but I'm agreeing with
No, no,
you.
no, no. It's okay. It's okay. I just want to make that point because I don't want this to sound like, okay, we are here just wanting to protect women and against men or anything. It's not something like that. It's just
Right.
even if I as a male mistreat a woman, I'm mistreating myself in the sense of neglecting my own feminine side. So it's not even
Mhm.
something about. Of course, it's about treating women with dignity and authenticity, of course, but also you yourself, everyone has a part of that, so to say. So by
Right.
you mistreating that principle anywhere, you are doing that harm to yourself first. So so we are just saying this to begin with on a foundational level of treat yourself nicely, because
Yeah.
if you are mistreating a lady, that's mistreating your own female side, and
Yeah. And the balance is
all
important
are
for
affected,
you,
all are
just like it is for the world. Yeah.
affected.
We're just,
Yeah.
what's our goal? Our goal is chant Hare Krishna and be happy, right? I mean, it's so
Mhm.
simple. It's so
Mm.
easy. So, it's not about dis, it's not, it's about repairing trust. It's not about breaking it, because we have problems. It's about finding a way to heal and to become
Mhm.
stronger and to repair and to love. And, I think, so bringing this to another part of this discussion, there's a lot of talk about, women's, being, uh, what words do they always use? Like, never independent and, the mood of servitude between the
Mhm.
husband and the wife.
Yeah,
And
like submission, for example.
yeah, submission is a big one, of course. Independence, lust, so, intelligence. So, as on the on the womanly side, just right along with what you're talking about, we have male and female. So
Mm.
on that womanly side, when it awakens, that soft and the gentler side, when you're feeling that, where is that coming from? Is that coming from, you know, another person's anger or desire to control or tough words or, domestic violence or any of those things? No, it comes when the woman feels loved, right? When a
Mhm.
woman feels loved, automatically she wants to express that love back by doing all these different things and, supporting and, making the house beautiful or any of those different things, like that feminine side comes out when there's a loving exchange,
Mhm.
So if we want to develop those qualities in the world around us, if we are traditionalists, then the key to that is based on the loving exchange and the loving mood, not on a controlling mood or a demeaning mood or you're just a woman or any of those types of sentiments that come from our own internal weaknesses, our
Mm.
inabilities to balance that male and female in ourselves, to value the individual, as we're talking about the impersonalism and the personalism, all of all of those beautiful qualities have to come from a place where someone feels safe and they feel secure and they feel cared for, you know
Yeah, 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 and I will extend that pattern ideally to every relationship, no? When you really are able to convey that sense of
Exactly.
trust, and we are in safe space here, and again going back to vulnerability, because
Exactly.
I won't be vulnerable if I don't feel this is a safe space to be vulnerable,
That's right.
no? So we have to recreate, invoke that space, and as you mentioned, when there is a loving spirit, and naturally everyone wants to give oneself fully in that situation. So
Right.
it's not about controlling the other person, but love in itself is a controller, so to say. When there's proper love, everyone is controlled by that in a healthy way. Now, if
Right.
there is a loving atmosphere of trust and confidence, and as I've heard so many times, I don't know, disciples of Prabhupada, like your good self and others, feeling so much mercy and affection coming from their Gurudev. So naturally, you are controlled by that. It's not that he wants to control you in a manipulative sense, but just the nature of the affection flowing creates the situation of control, of proper control. When
Right.
both sides are controlled by love, by higher power, and are willing to give their lives in trust and confidence and vulnerability.
So
So
just
yeah,
see how
that's how.
important it is, amongst leaders. Anyone who wants to take
Hmm.
a leadership role, whether it's as a mother, a community leader, a movement leader, anyone who has an influence, a sannyasi, anyone who has influence on others socially, if
Hmm.
they're not working to have that mood of dependence themselves inside, and being self-reflective and going inside and pulling out the weeds and then emulating the best qualities that they have, because after all, when you bring out the best in others, you bring out the best in yourself, and vice versa. When you bring out the best in yourself, you can also bring out the best in others. So, if we don't imbibe that mood of dependency, of servant of the servant, if we don't truly value, if we're not personalists, it turns everything on its ear and makes things very, very uncomfortable. So we need to encourage that, strongly, and in a sense, absolutely. Like it's hard to be absolute in this world, but that is something that we really must work for, is that personal relationship, the trust, everything that comes with it. Would you
Mm.
agree?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I was just thinking for a moment about some possible argument that sometimes may come in terms of, oh, but being personal with others takes so much time. It's such a mess.
Right.
It's a mess. You have to enter into the whole messiness of a relationship and back and forth and trying to understand each other, and it's not working. And it takes time and energy, and of course it's all worthy of doing that investment, but many times comes this type of like narrative in our own mind sometimes,
Yeah.
inside of us, like it's not worthy investing so much time, because you may make the calculation at the end of my lifetime, with that person I invested the thousands of millions of hours, and but
Yeah.
yeah, just trying to make the point that even if that will be messy, and that will be complex, and that will be uncomfortable at times, still worthy. I mean, the fruits that you get by daring to love, daring to relate to other in a detailed way, in a specified way, daring to develop a relationship with all that it entails. I mean, there's, in one sense, there's nothing more valuable than that at the end of your life, because we can
Mhm.
have money, we can have assets, we can have position, fame, we can have so many stuff, but if we don't have deep developed relationships, there is no actual fortune in our account, so to say. And
Vaikuntha
that is a
relationships. Have you heard
yeah,
that?
that's
Yeah.
a voluntary daily investment of quality time, where you are telling the other person, I care for you, you care for me, and that's why I'm giving my life to you. I mean, I'm spending time with you and being there with you. I mean, there's nothing more valuable than giving the other person your attention, your presence, your time.
Well, again, it
That's.
comes back to words. You don't even always have to use them. It isn't always
Mhm.
necessarily about like sitting and talking with somebody about their problems for an hour. But,
Yeah, yeah.
and not that we don't do that on occasion, we do, but
Mhm.
obviously we're not psychiatrists and psychoanalysts. That's not what we do in every moment of our lives. But, you know, uh, like the example is there. And of course, it's throughout. the teachings of Prahlad Maharaj as well, about, Vaikuntha relationships. And when people are doing well, when they're, happy in their spiritual lives, that emulates through the community. When people are having a difficult time, that brings the community down. We're not disenfranchised from each other. We're affected by each other's mentalities and how they're feeling. So that little bit extra of actually caring, even if it isn't just emulating from you, because that's who you are and that's how you feel and that's what you experience, that brings communities and makes them stronger. When people are happy, you have everything that person has to offer. When they're unhappy, you're going to have trouble getting them to make tea. So, not that we drink tea, but you understand my
Yeah, yeah,
example. Just boiling the water, they're not going to want to do it. So it has to be real. It has to come from inside. And, again, it starts with the vulnerability and the dependence, but it develops into all the loving aspects. And when that's there, people feel encouraged.
yeah. I've seen that in so many communities, as you mentioned, this interrelationship, between, if individuals are sharing from a quality place, that creates this total influence in the bigger community, uh, and one thing re-nourishes back the other. So
Yeah.
so important. It's not just about me and the other person I'm relating to, but how that plays out by in an extended form in a more macro
Yep.
level. But it has to
How do
begin, of course, in a personal way, and gradually
Exactly.
extend and
Okay,
so
so
on.
how do you build a healthy community? One loving exchange after the next. That's how you
Mm-hmm,
build a healthy community.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's not
Yeah.
about bullying or pushing or any of those things. It's about just,
Mm-hmm.
how are you today? Just
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As basic as that
what
sounds,
what are you doing? Yeah.
it's basic. It's basic in the sense of it forms a basis. It's a foundation.
Yeah.
No, never forget to ask the other person how you're doing today, no matter
And
how
actually care.
advanced you are or how much you have been relating to that with that person for decades. How are
What
you
are you
doing
up to
today?
today? Is that working
Yeah.
out? Do you have the
Hmm.
facility that you need? Just really
Hmm.
simple things, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
do you
Yeah.
need to take a little time to take care of something?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. As simple as that sounds, again, is foundational. So thank you. Thank you for reminding us of that. What else, Sudharma? Something else that
Yeah.
comes to your mind as we are gradually wrapping up our conversation? I don't know if something else is coming in your heart that you would like to share in connection to our main theme of radical personalism and its many multifaceted facets, so to say, multifaceted phases, uh, or something you may like to ask me. I don't want to be labeled as the only interrogator here, so if there is
Well,
something
I,
you'd
I
like to
didn't
ask,
feel that way.
I'm
I didn't
also
feel
open
that.
to that. Yeah, yeah, of course. But
Padmanabha
just
Swami, on a social level, I'm a girl, you're a guy, you're a sannyasi. I'm a just, like a quiet, reclusive person. There's so many ways that perhaps we, from a social perspective, may appear to come from very different situations. I've been, I mean, yeah, I mean, even so many levels and ways that we practiced our devotional lives. And yet, for me to sit down and speak with you is just like sitting down and speaking with a brother. It's not complicated. It's not a difficult thing. It's not, separated in so many ways. It's, that side always has to be there. The familiarity we can absolutely do without and need to. But the intimacy of individuals on the path as we're walking back home, back to Godhead, should be something that is deeply cherished
mm,
and lived, you know, and never devalued. So I just find it enjoyable speaking with you because we care about similar things, and that has nothing to do with anything except hu- human life and walking back home, back to Godhead as souls. So,
Thank you. Thanks so much for your words, Sudharma, and I deeply appreciate them and cherish them in my heart. And I'm happy that you were able to feel. I mean, I don't intend to present myself as your brother in the sense of, for me, you are an elder, so I don't want to sound like I'm like putting one to one on the same level with you. You are a senior Vaishnavi for me. But yeah, personally, I also like to think in terms of brothers and sisters. Like, even you are my elder sister in that case. But I like to keep that horizontality on some level. We are all brothers and sisters, elders, juniors, peers, but all serving together this beautiful
well,
cause of
and also we
love.
can't limit ourselves to just thinking about, okay, I joined the movement this many years before you.
Hmm. Hmm.
This is a process of lifetimes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And even if I've been performing devotional service for more lifetimes than someone else, maybe I'm just slower and more stubborn, and maybe they'll go home back to Godhead so much quicker than me. You know, this isn't
Yeah, yeah,
about that, right?
yeah, yeah.
Ultimately, yeah.
Yeah, we are
And
on the
it
same page.
shouldn't be yeah, it shouldn't be about that. Even just, I mean, it should be implanted deep within our hearts that we're all in these very vulnerable positions, and that, we are not in any position to put ourselves really above anything or anyone. That's the whole thing about the ant, right? So,
Mm, mm,
and Lord Brahma can be an ant in his next lifetime. Like, we are all in a situation where we just need to hold on and do the best that we can, and do the best that we can all around by others as well. Yeah, I think so.
yeah, yeah. I think so as well. We are all in this journey together, and I think that's gives so much more support and courage and empowerment. And despite, as you say, as our differences, our different backgrounds, our different psyches, and some scars we acquired. I mean, actually, that's what makes for me the conversation exciting and inspiring with you and with so many other people that I invite, and we have, in one sense, so much in common, and at the same time, so many things not in common. And for
Right.
me, that's the beautiful combination. In one sense, we agree on these most foundational ideas and points, and at the same time, we may disagree and have differences of
One
opinions or ways of
indifference.
doing things.
Variety is the spice
Yeah,
of life. I
be that
mean,
bit.
this
Yeah.
thankfully we have our differences, and we can build on those. We were talking about, okay, I'm sorry, I'm just going to say this anyway, even though it's the end of our talk.
No,
Community.
no,
When
yeah,
we
yeah.
were talking about community, every person holds a piece of that puzzle. When you
Hmm.
include everyone, you get the full picture. When you get all the
Yeah,
varieties and the differences, then you have community. You can't have it all be the same. At the same time,
yeah.
we all share something that's so intimate and so connected that is the same.
Hmm. Hmm.
And
Yeah.
we want to imbibe that as well.
Hmm. And we
And
are
that's the
faced,
beauty.
yeah, yeah. And we are pointing to the ideal community, Vrindavan, but somehow we will get there as much as we are able to embody that on our way to that place, so to say. No.
Yeah. Well, in that community, the walking is dancing, and the talking is singing. So that's a
Hmm.
high ideal for us. Yeah,
Yeah, but happy to know that we are going there together, so to say. Again, we're all in this journey together, and
absolutely.
yeah, I appreciate what you mentioned. We are building on our differences. That's such a bedrock, such an interesting, unique bedrock that we can embrace as radical personalists. We are persons, we are individuals, we are different, but that difference can be a foundational bedrock to create our common temple, so to say,
To
our
be a great
community.
thing, to be a fabulous thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, that's again, and okay. And also that's the broad minded as compared to the Kripana.
Mm-hmm.
The broad-minded, individual, which we're striving, of course, we want to be, does see the bigger picture, and sees the inclusiveness, and sees everyone, that everyone has, sees the special parts of all of Krishna's creation. The Kripana is trying to narrow everything down all the time, and put
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
everything into like a box or a space, and make it work. And, you know,
Yeah. 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 Thank you for being such a broad minded person, not only today, but trying to live your life from a place of generosity and dignity and authenticity. And I have get to know some of your life struggles, whether here or in personal conversations. So I always appreciate when someone comes with their stories and their scars, so to say, but trying to integrate all of that into a higher equation of love and service and a testimony with your life experience of what it means to navigate Krishna consciousness year after year, decade after decade, and continue with this beautiful longing that you have of keeping it personally, radically personally, very loving, very deep, very intimate. Beautiful word that you used. So for me, it's an inspiration. I hope when I reach your age, if I have to get to that age, I may do it with a similar spirit, with lots of hope. And for me, that's an inspiring presence of you as an elder. So thank you so much for that.
I mean, the struggles are so very real, and we all will
Yeah.
go through them. At the same time, what we're talking about here with the beauty, the personalism, the integrity, they are even more real than the
Mhm.
suffering.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's not sentiment, it's actual connection.
Yeah. That's the very first thing you mentioned, and that's the last thing you have mentioned. So with that beautiful point, we are making full circle. So if you agree, Sudharma, maybe we can conclude here our conversation. And one more time, deep gratitude for your presence. And I will share one more time for those who connected a little later. Sudharma's contact for those who would like to contact her. It's there on the screen, Susan Wieland at gmail.com. So thank you so much, Sudharma, for being with us. And thank you so much to all of you for being present there. We will meet again in 2 weeks for our next episode of the Free Radical podcast.
Thank you, Maharaj.